You're listening to Tabletop Arcanum, a podcast dedicated to learning and exploring the hobby of tabletop gaming. Your hosts are Justin Taylor and Richard Geese, so sit back and relax as we talk, discuss, and joke our way through the hobby we love so much. Calling all mutants, Professor Xavier needs your help. Become the X-Men and battle to protect humanity. X-Men Mutant Insurrection invites you and up to 5 other mutants to safeguard our world while playing as iconic characters like Gambit, Rogue, Storm, Cyclops, Wolverine, and more. Choose from 8 different plots and launch the Blackbird on missions around the world as you fight your way to the final showdown. Whether you're infiltrating the elite society known as the Hellfire Club, investigating the mysterious happenings on the island of Krakoa, or taking on Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants, X-Men Mutant Insurrection brings some of the greatest stories in comics straight to your tabletop. Welcome to Tabletop Arcanum. This is Justin, and I'm your host for this episode. And today we are talking about X-Men Mutant Insurrection. This is put out by Fantasy Flight Games, designed by Richard Linus and Brandon Perdue. It is 1 to 6 players, plays in about 1 to 2 hours, and is a fully co-op dice game. MSRP is $54.99. So let's dive into this review and talk a little bit about X-Men Mutant Insurrection. Let's talk first impressions. Box art is flashy, colorful, has all of your iconic favorite X-Men on the cover, but there's a lot of X-Men, so maybe your favorite is not on there. Sorry. But it has the iconics, Wolverine, Cyclops, and it's big, it's eye-catchy, it's bold, it's action-packed. It is what you would think an X-Men board game box cover would look like. And then you open the box, and the contents are not really matching what the outside kind of presents to you. There's a bunch of cards, there's a little bit of punch board, and literally what I mean by little is you have your standees for your X-Men heroes, you have your completion tokens and your damage tokens, and that's about it. It's very token light compared to a lot of Fantasy Flight games, which is not a bad thing. It's just the size of the box kind of gives you a bigger presentation than what you actually get on the inside. Now, that could be made up by gameplay, that could be made up by a lot of different things, so let's talk about some of the good and bad of this X-Men Mutant Insurrection. Overall, Mutant Insurrection builds on the bones of the Arkham Horror Elder Sign dice game. It has a lot of those callbacks to it. In the plus column, it has some familiar ground. If you've already played Elder Sign, you already kind of know what you're trying to do. You're trying to roll dice and complete tasks on tarot-sized mission cards. And if you succeed, you get a benefit. If you don't succeed, you'll get a penalty. You're trying to accomplish some sort of plot or goal. Now, Mutant Insurrection changes up the formula a little bit because the X-Men are all about working together, so you're looking at getting bonuses from other team members, getting bonds or rivalries between team members, and kind of building that narrative amongst the team itself. It does a lot of good stuff trying to pull that theme across and trying to say, hey, you are playing Cyclops, Wolverine, Jean Grey in this power thruple struggle, and you can help with each other by giving your assist card, which changes the dice pool for someone else, and also gives them a different version of your character's normal power. That's all well and good. I love how that works. There's a lot of interesting, you want to team up, you want to go on missions together, but you don't want to necessarily, put all your eggs in baskets. So when you have 2 mutants, maybe they'll stick together, maybe they'll split up, depending on the mission availability to you. But you also have, when you're playing larger player count games, you can kind of pair off into teams, or in a full 6 player count, you can have 2 teams of 3 and kind of divide and conquer some of those tougher missions if you need it. You can go solo, and I'm not saying that you can't do that with Mutant Insurrection, but the game is really designed to work as a cohesive team, and they give you a lot of they give you a lot of tools to make that happen. And that's some of the good things that happen. There's a couple other basic mechanics for that change from Elder Sign that I was a big fan of. For example, in Elder Sign, if you can't complete a task on a roll, you would have to lose a die, and then you can re-roll. Mutant Insurrection changes that to where you just get essentially 2 re-rolls and whatever your end result is kind of what you get to use it on. You don't really lose dice unless a card actually says you do. So it's less harsh in some of those penalties. Other kind of nice things is it does keep itself on the compact side. However, it's kind of a mixed blessing because the box is definitely a little bit larger than Elder Sign. This is the same size box that Arkham Horror 3rd Edition comes in. So you're not getting an equivalent exchange as far as like box and price and stuff. Some of the other nice things Mutant Insurrection does is they had a beautiful and fantastic art team designing all the cards. It just screams theme. It screams X-Men theme specifically. Blue and gold, the primary X-Men colors are throughout all the cards. The action art and stuff of that nature is really neat. And when you get to the final showdown or boss battle of your plot for the game, a couple tarot cards kind of smushed together to create a tableau of like in the comic world, a splash page style art where you get this like opening page and it's a couple panels and it's big, it's bold, it's action packed. And so there's a lot of cool stuff in that. Likewise, they give you 16 different mutants of the X-Men to start with. You have a lot of the old favorites and original X-Men team, but you also have some newer characters. I hate to say X-23 is on the newer side, but she actually is. But even the newest generation, like Armor, are available as player characters. And if that's not the case, there's also a deck of mutant allies that you can get as ally cards, and maybe not their playable characters, but there's a whole deck of mutants that are available. So you can get a lot of those characters that you're familiar with, that you've seen, and of that nature. So some of the opportunities in X-Men Mutant Insurrection. Let's talk about that. Because it was built on the Elder Sign framework, it still has a lot of the swinginess and random factors that Elder Sign has when it comes to difficulty of the game. You can set your threat track at a couple different starting points, but based on the cards that you get, and based on just your dice rolls, that's all the randomness and factor that can change that difficulty. You can have a great game because the dice are going well and just literally stomp through. There was a game I had where I just kind of went, all right, this is turn 1, complete that mission. This is turn 2, complete that mission. Turn 3, complete that mission. And just kind of like did almost like a monochrome checklist down and never really felt like I was in danger of losing the game. That being said, it can also go the other direction where you just can't get your dice to work. You can't, or you get an odd combination of cards to start with that are too tough because you don't have any allies or built up stuff in your team yet. So there's a lot of swinginess, unfortunately, in that difficulty range. Now, some people enjoy that, but I feel it could be a little bit more evened out than it is. Likewise, it does have a small advantage over Elder Sign. The dice manipulation rolls and powers of the X-Men seem to be a little bit more prevalent than Elder Sign was. So I do want to call that out, so you can actually manipulate the faces of the dice a little bit easier in Mutant Insurrection, which taps down a little bit on that randomness factor that Elder Sign had difficulty-wise, but not so much that it's non-existent anymore. Likewise, there are 5 continent decks with only like 5 cards each. After playing several rounds of X-Men Mutant Insurrection, I've seen a lot of the cards, and that was only a few rounds. So replayability is there, but variety in what you're going to see between games really isn't. Another factor that I will put in both a good and bad column is the plot cards. There's 8 different plots, and they have a couple different difficulties amongst them, and the difficulties are more of how complex each plot is. And the plot is kind of a mission and tagline where, okay, here's your first objective, try to do 5 missions. And then once you do 5 missions, a card will flip, and you get to put in something else into play. You get a little flavor text and kind of advancement of the plot that you're working on. And all of them build to the, quote, final showdown, which is where you square off with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, or maybe you're taking on Brotherhood Task and the Sentinel program. Maybe you are discovering the secrets of Krakoa. So you get this big reveal, big splash art, you build it, and you get this kind of big fight sequence. It doesn't necessarily feel always that epic. And while it looks good, everything builds towards it. And it's one of those things that I'm not 100% sold on, that there's no branching narrative. There's no, like, if you succeed this before a doom counter or before you hit X threat, put this into play versus put that into play. There's only checkpoints and gates that you're trying to meet, and if you lose the game before you meet them, you just lose the game. There's little variance between each of the plots, with little variance between the core missions that are just kind of built and you shuffle through. While there's a lot of variety in the heroes and player characters that you can pick, the game mechanics that you play against really stay kind of similar. That's one of those things that I've seen with games out of Fantasy Flight before, where there seems to be room for expansion baked in, but so much so that it feels kind of incomplete. And that was the other piece, is this is a $55 game with not too much variety between missions other than what mission you're doing and what heroes you're bringing. Some of the mechanics are interesting, but ultimately you're just trying to get to that final showdown and beat up whoever the big bad guy is. Not a lot of stuff in the box. There's not a lot of deep gameplay in the box for that price tag, and I think that is what really soured me on X-Men Mutant Insurrection. Like, I don't mind the dice chucker, I love the theme, big X-Men fan myself, so it does capture me in a lot of the team play and higher player count aspects, because I love that cooperation. It really does feel like you have to work together as a team, so I give it a lot of credit for that, and that's about it. The rest of the gameplay, if you're looking as a solo player, it's not really there. There's a lot of other games I would probably pick over this if I was going to play a solo board game. I would even, for the time investment, I would even play some of the Arkham games solo before I would play this one. If it was quicker, if it was snappier, if the timeline of gameplay was like an hour or less pretty consistently, I think it would do a lot better. But with the time investment aspects and the little, not very high variance, it kind of leaves you wanting more, but you've already spent 2 hours doing what you're doing. I would recommend the game for X-Men fans who just want a dice chucker, or if you're a big Elder Sign fan, I would say that this game will have some of those changed mechanics and a different theme and kind of give you a refresher facelift. It's not quite Elder Sign 2.0, but it's somewhere in that 1.5 category. If you're looking for a deep, thoughtful strategy game that's going to get you a bunch of variety and a huge swing on narrative, this is one I would probably pass on. I've already kind of talked about the MSRP being $55, and that's one of those pieces. I don't think it's a $55 game. I would be struggling to justify this at the $40 price point personally. I feel like it's sitting somewhere between 30 and 40 in my mind. If they had packed it in a smaller box and things of that nature, some of that impression would probably have worked a little bit better. Either way, that is the Tabletop Arcanum's take on X-Men Mutant Insurrection. I thank you for listening. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, get your notifications set up so that you can find out when we release new content. And until next time, this has been Justin, and happy gaming, and especially Excelsior. You've been listening to Tabletop Arcanum, produced by Justin Taylor. This episode is hosted by Justin Taylor. Mixing and editing by Richard Geese. Original theme by Paul Moore and Isaac Gilbert. Check the description for this episode's featured background music. You can follow us on most social media platforms. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow, and leave us a review if you would. As always, thanks for listening.